Hi, and welcome to our Nordic seminar, What We Share, Co-Living in the Housing Market. In this seminar, we will discuss the role of co-living in the housing market today and in the future. We will start with an introduction by Martin Bråten from the National Museum, and then continue with presentations by Helen Hard, the Planning and Building Authorities Oslo, and OBOS. Afterwards, we will have a panel discussion led by Anne Rokkan. If you have any questions, you're welcome to use the commentary section, and we will ask them in the end. So welcome and enjoy.
Hello. I hope that some of you had the chance to see the first part of this seminar from Stockholm 2 days ago. There we presented the history and conception of the exhibition What We Share, which has transformed the pavilion in Venice into the common room of a future co-housing project designed by Helen Hard architects. There is both a need and a public demand to come up with new and more environmentally sustainable, but also socially sustainable housing forms. In the Nordic countries, we live large and scattered. Take Norway as an example. We have around 5.4 million inhabitants living in 2.6 million homes. Well over half of us live in detached houses with 60 square meters each in average. 40% of all households are one-person households, and we have a high degree of loneliness. Today, only 2.4% of the homes in Norway are some form of common housing projects. This includes special needs homes and senior housing. This is interesting seen in the light of the recent survey Future Living, which shows that 26% are positive about sharing rooms and facilities with others, and 35% of single people could see themselves moving into a co-housing concept in the near future or later in life. When we look at the number of 1 million one-person households, even if we cannot assume that all of these are single or within the respondent groups, we get an idea of the possible scale of interest. It is very possible that co-housing could be the answer to this demand for more social housing forms. Co-housing is a pragmatic form of collective living. You have your own fully equipped housing unit, but give away a little of your private space in order to gain common space. You have a choice of being private when you need or social when you want it. It can be adapted to many different lifestyles. It can be large, like Stolplykan in Linköping. It can be a small co-housing, like Havstein in Trondheim with only 3 housing units. It can be urban, here, Friis gate 6 in Oslo, or rural, like the Trudeslund by Vannkunsten in Denmark. It can be cheap or it can be expensive. But how to realize them within the current housing market? Today's conversation will be about that. Models for realizing communal housing has varied, but the model from the famous family stair in Greece, one of the predecessors to modern co-housing, which was financed by the industry owner Godin and later donated to the workers who live there, is probably nothing we can sit and wait for. But there are other ways, often paved with obstacles. If we go back to Havstein, finished in Trondheim in 1986, the initiative came from the residents who for a long time searched for a plot for a co-housing project with 5 units. In the end, they did not find a suitable plot, but came to an agreement with the parents of one of the residents to separate a part of their plot. That plot was not big enough for the original plans and could only fit 3 housing units. Hence the modest and downscaled size of the project. The struggle continued, for example, getting finances since the architectural ambitions were too high for Husbanken, the Norwegian housing bank at the time, and so on. But they succeeded in realizing a project. If we look at Friis gate, it was a very different kind of model. The initiative came from a housing association in itself. Early in the 1980s, USBL initiated a workshop with their members about a future co-housing project. 25 people took part. Many of them later moved into the house when it was realized. The different units were distributed through the Housing Association's normal seniority system, so it was not for everyone. Another example is at Villa Holmbo in Tromsø, where a group of self-builders won an ID competition by the local municipality and hence got a chance to buy the plot for the co-housing project. So these are just a few historical examples showing that there are several ways, but a lot of hard work, smart financing models, and some luck needed to realize such projects. In Norway today, even if sharing solutions have become a buzzword, very few co-housing projects are built with a high degree of communal activity. Realizing alternative housing projects in the current market situation appears extremely difficult. We were last week contacted by one of the architects of this Frisgate project, who in the recent years have worked toward establishing new co-housing projects through different channels, from self-building models to commercial developers. Even with his experience, he did not succeed and has recently given up that project. In Vindmøllebakken, that we will hear more about later, a recent co-housing project that has been successful, the architects Helen Hard partly owned the property themselves and had to go into the role as both commissioner and developer. Is that what is needed to realize a co-housing project today? So, do we need the municipalities to regain some control of the market to stimulate or regulate? Are the large developers too slow to respond? Are they unwilling to take the risks needed? How can we accommodate for more self-building and resident initiatives and help provide for an access to plots and financing? I look forward to hear our panel discuss such issues today and hopefully help us understand not only the obstacles, but also how to overcome them and how to provide communal housing forms needed and wanted for tomorrow. Thank you.
Building communities, gaining by sharing. Contact between people and the sense of belonging to a community are among the basic needs for us as humans. In a world where the feeling of loneliness is on a rise and social communities are fading, we believe that this is ever more important to strive towards when creating housing in the future. In Venice, we have showcased a full-scale section of the first floor of a co-living housing project. The installation is a vision of a sustainable future model on how to build a community and a living environment simultaneously. The installation in Venice is a further development of a housing project in Vindmøllebakken in Stavanger, like Martin mentioned earlier, realized in 2019. And Vindmøllebakken is the pilot project of a new housing model called Gaining by Sharing. Vindmøllebakken is unique compared to many other housing projects because the shared facilities is run by the residents themselves through an integral self-management structure created and operated by them. Gaining by Sharing, the housing model arose from a belief that one can reduce CO2 emissions and create sustainable neighborhoods by moving closer together and sharing spaces that we do not need to own privately, but also from a belief that we need to start building dwellings that are better adapted to the users themselves, which are currently often forgotten and overlooked in the conventional housing market. Gaining by Sharing is also designed to create a shared environment that supports the community. Every inhabitant has their own private dwelling, slightly smaller than normal units, but organized around generous, inspiring, and high-quality common spaces. Common spaces are carefully integrated throughout the building complex, inviting to use and becoming part of everyday life. With this infrastructure, one can minimize the overall built area. A community engagement process is central to the gaining by sharing model, with a series of meetings and workshops becoming an integral part of building the community. This is key to ensure that the needs of the future users sits at the heart of the project. People can join workshops early in the process to become familiar with the concept, influence their own apartment, and most importantly, it is a chance to get to know each other and engage in forming a future community. Vindmøllebakken is proof that we can implement a systemic change in the conventional housing market and in how we plan and develop housing projects. The gaining by sharing model is a tool to ensure that the end user is engaged from the beginning of the development process and introduces a new method for stronger co-creation and coordination of the different parties involved. For now, gaining by sharing is offered as a business-to-business model to developers. It's offered as a license model with access to an optimized system for designing co-living structures and community building processes. Along, we offer a process management mediating between the developer, architect, and resident. Exemplar projects are critical for creating change in the building and construction industry. Now, 10 years after the first seeds were sown about the development of gaining by sharing, and after the completion of Vindmøllebakken, we notice a clear movement and interest in the market and in the world. There is a want and a need for an alternative method of housing procurement, one that ultimately strives towards a more socially and environmentally sustainable way of living. We have new conversations and we have new opportunities and projects underway with gaining by sharing developments proposed in Alta that you can see on the image, Voss and Engøy. Two of the projects came out of competitions that were earmarked as co-housing projects. But we are still questioning and developing how we can introduce gaining by sharing and new concepts for communal living at an increased rate in order to create a wider reaching impact. Thank you.
My name is Oda Solberg, and I'm speaking here today as the project lead of Nye boligkvaliteter, new qualities for housing, in the planning and building authorities in Oslo. So the challenges, the variation of housing in Oslo today. This is just the facades, but also the apartment types and the solutions and the forms of living are very monotonous. The project is funded in the political platform that says more variation in housing over the whole city, and that we should work for more housing adapted to new and alternative types like compact housing, collective and generational housing, self-build and city ecology projects. We are making two publications. The first one is about the collective housing, and the other one was about the self-build, and we're working with eco-housing. We're also following up relevant projects in the planning and building authorities. And we are at the same time looking at how the municipality can facilitate for more of these types of housing. This is an ongoing project. We have in the publication we have looked at several studies. One of them is the future living that Martin also talked about. And this is the numbers for Oslo, where even more can find this way of living attractive. So it's 31% in Oslo that would like to consider living in a co-housing. And this is almost the same number as they did in Bergen in Bopilot. They have researched senior housing, and there is even more in that group that I would like to share. But this group is divided. They have different expectations about price level. Some are expecting to pay more. A lot are expecting to pay the same, and some are expecting to pay less. There is also different expectations about maintenance and services. Some like to have a professional take care of the service, and some like to do everything themselves, a little part. And if you take this 31% seriously, and we have the amount of people living in Oslo, it would be 216,000 people potentially interested in co-housing. And if we have an average of 2 persons per dwelling, this is 108,000 dwellings. What do we have in Oslo now? We have 2 projects with co-housing for all, in total 187 dwellings. We have 6 projects with serviced co-housing, and that's 652 dwellings in 6 projects. And for elderly, we have 4 projects with 205 dwellings. And co-housing for groups with special needs, we have 143 dwellings in 14 different projects. So, of course, not every one of these people will decide to buy co-housing. But there is a really, really large difference between the existing stock and the amount of people that could be interested. But interest is worth nothing if you're not willing or have the possibility to pay the price. They do not have the same expectations, motivations, and they're not looking for the same concept. And this comes in addition to all the other things that the developer must consider, like the place and the qualities and the price level. So how do you make co-housing for the same price as a normal apartment? This is the model from the beginning of the 80s, and that's the same that is illustrated in the Gaining by Sharing project. You shrink your private space a little, and you get a lot back. So what could be the problem with this model today? This illustrates quite clearly. To the left, you see a 1-bedroom apartment in Friskatte from 1987. The innovation was joining the kitchen and the living room. And 40 years later, what has happened? The other one is a typical apartment today. And the kitchen/living room is here to stay. And the bedroom has shrinked a lot. And the only room which is bigger than before is the bathroom. The apartment is also darker and deeper. So where can you shrink this area further? We have looked at a lot of different co-housing projects. And we see that there is 4 kind of main strategies for financing the common rooms. And all of them are about trading qualities. One is, as we talked about, the reduction of the private space. And the other one is finding cheaper land. And some governments do have strategies for this. But finding cheaper land could also be the willingness to move to a less attractive location and maybe trade the social inner city life to the social life inside the co-housing. You can, of course, ask the residents to pay more, but you know that almost half of the people will fall off and not be attracted if they have to pay more. There is also many examples of the builder having less income. That's obviously a fact when there is building groups building co-housing, but there is not unusual by commercial developers as well. And then you have the cost of this and distribution of the private area going into the common area. If you have a flat amount of square meters per unit, you will favor the larger units and make it easier for families. If you have a percentage, you will favor the small units and make it easier for first-time buyers. And many of the co-housing projects has a combination of all these strategies. We, of course, have households which have different current situations. We have both household that has too little space and households, one can argue, has too much space. And the young group, according to the Future Living report, are more motivated by saving money, but less willing to give away private space. The suggestion is that they're already paying a lot and living in small spaces. So it's maybe easier to make co-housing for the group, considering downscaling their apartment or house. This is the final slide, and this asks a question that I would like to leave. This is called a cluster apartments, with the gray one being satellites, which are small apartments inside a larger flat share. The rent here is quite cheap, but it's cheap because of the structure around and access and land to land and financing, and not necessarily by shrinking space. So each satellite is for 1 to 2 persons. The average is 30 square meters, but in addition they have over 30 square meters common space. So it's a choice to live in another way, but it's not a strategy to shrink personal space.
Hello, my name is Hanne Løvbrøtte, difficult in English. I work in Obos, which is the largest housing developer in Norway, and one of the largest in Scandinavia. We are a building association, and we are owned by more than 500,000 members. And our mission is to build housing for them. So we have a responsibility to build the society of the future, and in doing so, fulfill housing dreams. We are inspired by Helen Hard and their project Vindmøllebakken. It's a very beautiful project, and in this film, which is in BBC, you can see from Vindmøllebakken and from one of my projects in Obos, and also from a network called Pådriv. I would recommend that. Sharing spaces, sharing lives. It's about life quality and how this works so good in Vindmøllebakken and what we are trying to do in our projects. So for me, it's about life quality. What can we do to improve life quality for all the people who wants to live in our flats? It's really important when you go to the research. What does community do with us? To belong somewhere, to be a part of a bigger community. It's really important. And I think this is what we can do better and more in the future. I have some examples of what we are building. We actually have some experience with co-housing. This is for seniors. We are building in Oslo, Lambertseter. We also build for young people with special needs. I think we have built like 100 flats for young people. And how this works is like a group of parents. They come to us and ask, can you build this in some project? And we say yes, look at the projects we have, and then we agree. And they live together and have also common spaces. And a person from the city who works there as well. And right now we are building a full-scale test arena for for future housing, because we think we have a responsibility to learn and do better and to change what we are doing and to improve. So this is a building in Vollebekk in Oslo. We are currently having a lot of residents that we are cooperating with. They're going to rent flats here, and they will move into this building in October. So in the second floor of this building, we have co-housing. And we will find out how this works. We will ask them, of course, and we will also work with them to build better neighborhoods and build a better community. We have started that process before they move in. And they are really a beautiful bunch of people. They and all are in a kind of a new place in their life, and they want to share more. They want to combat loneliness, and I think we will learn a lot with this project that we can use in new projects. This is a building. It's almost finished. This is the second floor of this building, where people are sharing a lot. And so far they have started to know each other, because in other kinds of co-housing, maybe people know each other from before and they agree that we will have this project, but in this project they don't know each other. So we have to facilitate to build a community and the sense of community and sense of ownership. And this is another project I'm working with, the urban village in Furuset in Oslo, where we won a competition hosted by the city of Oslo, where we will have co-housing for sale for maybe the first time in this way. And we also have plans to have cooperation with people who wants to move into this project to design this housing. And I must say the city of Oslo has been really flexible, because we are breaking some rules to do this, but they have been very positive so far. And I hope we will be able to buy the plot very soon. So I believe that it's really important that we think differently and that we are able to change, because we build so many flats and housing, and we are thinking maybe too traditional. So I truly believe that we have to have a large diversity of housing in the future. And as such a large developer, we have a responsibility to do so, to have larger diversity in the housing market. Thank you.
Thank you so much for great introductions of yourselves and your experiences with the concept of co-housing. And my name is Anna Rokkan, and I'm a journalist. And the next part will take place as a conversation between us. And as Martin introduced, today is about how co-housing can survive in the free market. And from the theory of a free market, we know that as long as someone has a demand for something and has a willingness to pay for it, it will be supplied. Someone will sell it. And we also know that this isn't always just that easy. There's a lot of possible market failures, and the government is already regulating and supplying the housing market to kind of try to make up for this. So I thought in this conversation we will try to examine these elements. Is there a demand? Is there a supply? Why isn't there enough? And is co-housing suffering from some market failures, some lack of information? And how can we try and make up for this? Because we know that there are way less co-housing projects in Norway than our neighboring countries. So why isn't it happening in a bigger scale? But first of all, I thought I would like to hear your perspectives on what co-housing actually is offering us. Like, why do we actually need it? And Randi, as someone who's actually built a very well-functioning co-housing project, what was your kind of ambition for that project? What was it you wanted to add to the lives of the people living there and to the community?
I mean, the overall idea was to create a housing model that was much more giving a whole answer to sustainability, not only focusing on energy or focusing on building materials, but taking everything in to a whole model. And of course, there was a great focus on the social sustainability with moving closer together and starting to share, because we've talked about loneliness, we've talked about demographic changes in society that isn't really being met by the homogeneous market we see today.
Right. And Oda, what is the government's ambitions to contribute to this?
You see that co-housing creates really stable communities. So it's advantages for the person themselves. Because studies see that when asked, they say that they have a better quality of life than before they moved in. But also, one of the few things you can measure about social sustainability in housing is how long a person will stay. And this makes stable housing and stable communities And this is in co-housing, people don't move as often. They like it very much. So it's good for the person themselves and good for the society around.
Right. And Hanne, and from yours and Obo's perspective, what's kind of in it for you?
What did you mean to build more co-housing?
Yeah. What would be your motivation to build more of these projects?
I think it's some of the same that you were saying, like creating better life quality and more sense of community and stable neighborhoods. It's, I mean, we are building for our members, obviously, but could we do anything more important than improving their life quality, really? I don't think so.
It's a good enough reason in my ears. And I can just add, because a couple of months ago I read a book by an author called Norina Hertz, and she wrote the book The Lonely Century. It's really a nice book, and she has one history in there from Japan, because in Japan there's a trend now amongst elder women. They started noticing elder women doing more and more small crimes, just enough to be put to jail. Soft security jails. And it turns out that they did this because in jail they found this kind of society and support that they didn't find in their lonely living situations and in society. And I think we know that loneliness, there are a lot of reasons to obviously to live together, also environmentally, and but this loneliness, we know that it's a very big threat to the public health, and it's cost us a lot of money, probably, the health risk about being just lonely, living alone. So in that perspective, it's I'd like to go over to like why the supply side of this. Why do you think that there isn't a more eagerness to build and maybe to subsidize and to kind of make it easier to kind of fulfill these kind of projects? And I thought like maybe we could listen to you, Rondi. You've had success with this Vindmøllebakken. How was the process? Was it? Did you feel like it was a welcoming process in Norway, or? Can you tell us a little about the obstacles you might have occurred?
We had a lot of obstacles, but to your question whether it was welcomed in Norway, I would say it was. We had the first seminar I think back in 2013, and everyone was wondering whether the oil capital of Norway, Stavanger, was ready for some more socially oriented housing. But we had 200 meetings to the first seminar, so I think the welcome in the market was overwhelming. But there was a lot of obstacles because it's a very conservative sector. Everyone's used
to housing,
the housing sector and the developing sector. Everyone's used to do everything in the same manner, budgets, everything. So, and also, of course, in terms of just finding solutions, more technical solutions. So there was a lot of things to innovate and change. So it was a long process, difficult, but also very interesting.
What was some of the when you first started it? What did you have to come around?
Of course, everyone was unsure whether this would sell because it was so new. And this is also why we worked out this new process, actually giving the end user information about what kind of model this is. Because if you say collective housing in Norway, everyone thinks about the 70s. So we had to kind of So we started there, and then just getting in touch with the market. But then again, we put it out for sale when Stavanger was on the lowest point, and it was selling better than many other conventional housing projects.
But you own the whole circle. You own the land, and
Helen Hard only owned a part of the land, and we met an investor called Sissel Eire that was willing to invest in innovation and a sustainable solution. And together with Kruse, now Solan Eiendom, we bought the whole land and started to build on an intention of realizing a pilot project of gaining by sharing. And
did you have any profit of this?
Gaining by sharing hasn't had any profit of it. It was like developing the model through the project. The byggherre,
the builder.
The builder had, I think, profit, but much lower than normal. And this
Right.
was agreed upon.
Yeah, so because this is what I'm wondering about. For a normal developer, and I know that Johanna isn't, you're building for your members, and which is also the owners, but what is the motivation and what is the biggest challenge to kind of motivate a developer to go into such a project when you know that the profit is maybe unsure, it's a different risk situation than with a regular project?
Yes, I think it's a lot about risk because it's risky for us, but it's also a risk for the person who's buying this flat. Can I sell it for a better price later? And is it safe? Because it's such a large investment for a single person or a family. It's the biggest one you do. So are you willing to buy something that's not inside your flat? It's like Oda was saying here. It's do you want this extra bedroom or do you want a bigger shared living room? Are you willing to pay for that? And will the next person, next family, be willing to pay for that? So I think it's some uncertainty around that. We have built some shared or co-housing. And we are willing to have a lower income also in some projects. But in Oslo today, it's so expensive to buy land, and also the building cost is like rising at least 30% for just the second 2 years. So it's really crazy to calculate the projects right now. And I think when everything is so risky, people are more conservative.
Right.
Yeah.
I would like to continue on that. What are you willing to pay for? Because with conversations with Danish architects, Vannkunsten, that has drawn a lot of co-housing projects, they say that in Denmark they are counting the area of your apartment, including common area in all projects. So people in Norway, you say BRA internally in your apartment. That's what you can sell. But in Denmark, they're more used to the thoughts of having to pay for stairs, a good entrance
And
to
that
pick
would be
up your
trouble to
mail.
sell in Norway.
Yeah. So they're kind of used to you're paying for more than just your private square meters. And that's kind of a mindset that is different. So the leap is not so far away to pay a little bit more for a little bit extra of the common square meters. So that could be one thing, like how we count the value of our...
And this is how we've sold Vindmøllebakken. We've sold the common areas.
Right.
And it's not, I would say, to build on to the conversation, that it's not much risk to build now. Like, I think we did a pilot project. Everything was for the first time. And it was also expensive land. So I think, like, the next time, it's not going to be more expensive, and you don't pay more for these apartments than normal apartments. So I think it's a question, why don't we do it just even faster now, building more? And the question is, who's going to do that change somehow? Is it
That's
so maybe
exactly
this
it,
is where we're
right?
going to continue. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true, because I have another question. For Johan and Obos, to have to be able to sell something, even the stairs or an extra living room or whatever, you'll have to build it first. And I think you're right that the risk assessment is very different, because it's new and it's an uncertainty. But if a cooperative like Obos can't do it or isn't doing it enough, who will?
It's a good question. Because we should be in the front, I think, testing out new things. And that's one of the things we're doing with the Living Lab right now. We are willing to test. We are using money on this, and we will have data. And, you know, when you have data, you can convince everybody about the solution. I think your data is really important, actually.
Yeah, I agree.
That we have, you know, we are going to do interviews and having a lot of processes with the residents. And if this data shows that this is a better way of living, we should do it more, then we could convince, you know, the obos and the calculators and
So
engineers.
what are your barriers? Where in the system do you kind of get stuck? Is it a risk, or is it just it's a question about money, or?
Yeah, and it's about a bit like you said, Randi. We are doing things in this way normally, and we've done that for many years, and it works.
Yeah.
But then you have to think like
And it
differently.
pays.
And it pays. And we are used to calculate like sold square meters. That's the way you calculate. And if you're going to change that, you have to change a big system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people's mindset. So it's about tradition, risk, the habits.
Yeah.
It's a big system to change. But in some projects, we like, okay, now we take it all the way. We just try, and maybe we fail, and maybe we win. We don't know.
This might be a. Do you feel like you represent sort of Oslo municipality, and do you feel some kind of responsibility also to kind of get this kind of culture going, and to participate in it and make it easy?
Yeah. So this the project I'm leading, it started with a political ambition, but it said like working for, so it was not defined. But what we saw, the first thing we had to do was kind of the different expressions. People still don't know the difference between shared flat and co-housing. The future living research showed that. A lot of people have never heard of co-housing, and if you ask, do you want to share your home, they will say no. And if you say, first explain what co-housing is and then ask, a lot of people would say yes. So you have to kind of spread the happy message. And there was also a big need for definitions and good examples. So this was kind of the first step. And then we're now working with how can the municipality build on, and what can we actually do in laws of Norway and the system of Oslo, and kind of the Oslo doesn't have a lot of land, so what can you do more like pushing, be a pusher.
But the fact about how the land and the buildings and the cities that we have already are kind of built and organized, I was wondering about that, because all I hear about co-housing is in new buildings. So would you say that the housing stock that we have, could that be an obstacle for co-housing? Does it have to be in a new building, or is it possible to use like the mass of buildings that we have?
There is a lot of co-housing in old factories and stuff like that. And they have adapted the common space, are often used in those spaces, which is hard to make good flats. So that's a kind of a pairing which is really good, because you can make good use of a space that wouldn't be profitable in other ways.
Like the basements and...
Yeah, or like a big hall, and it's maybe too wide, so the light doesn't get all the way in. So you can't make living space there. Yeah.
So does this have to be private engagements, or is it something that the municipality and the governments kind of seek to initiate, or?
I don't think the city of Oslo would build a lot of co-housing themselves. It could be like implemented into a housing they already have, but I don't see the municipality acting as a developer.
No.
No.
I see. Did you have a comment on that?
No, we just have 2 projects coming on, which are, as I ended up with saying, was competition coming from the municipality that was earmarked for co-living. So I definitely think that could be one of the ways for the municipality to push it even further, because I think it's a really question whether it's you were asking whether there was money earned on Vindmøllebakken. I think there was a big pilot project, and we did a very big innovative work, and now everyone wants to come and visit, everyone wants to come and learn, and it is really a question if it's the private developers' task to innovate in the housing market in Norway, or is it the government's task to innovate?
I'm not promising what Oslo would do in the future, but we also looked at this theme of self-building and building groups. And one of the most important things that different city governments do is having land competitions. So you have different criteria, which creates another way of housing. And some have strict rules, and some are inviting all, and some are just quality, and some do it the normal way with like bidding, and highest bidder gets the grant. But they have criteria in addition.
How do you feel about this? Well, whose responsibility is it? You are something in between, aren't you? Like, because you're a private developer, but still not driven by only profit. So, does it lay like a responsibility to kind of get this market going and get the numbers that you were talking about, or does it have to be a private initiative or a very like governed decision?
I think it should be a mix, actually, because, like you said, competitions could work, and the project that I mentioned, the urban village, Furuset, that was a competition from the city of Oslo, and we wanted to win this, and then we tried a lot of different things, because, you know, it was a competition, and then you build more than you usually would do. And we won, and that was great fun, you know. We like to win. But then that could push, you know, could push the market, actually. Because it's a great thing to do. But then the city has to maybe offer the plot for a lower price, or they have to have some incitments to make this going. But we also have a private responsibility. So I think both. If you work from all kinds of perspectives, it will be the best result.
Because I'm not a developer, but as I understood, time is actually the most important right now when you develop, because it takes so much time to do a zoning plan, and it takes so much time before you come to the introduction into the market. So time is really essential. So we actually try to also do gaining by sharing as a business-to-consumer model, together with a group in Bergen. It was a group of residents that wanted to build a gaining by sharing project. We tried for 2 years.
Was this the Bølgen?
Bølgen,
yeah.
which
Charming little group called the Bølgen, the Wave, which
exactly,
is they know that they are going to be Eldre Bølgen, the group, actually. So they're looking for a place to settle down.
But we were contacting so many developers already sitting on land. We came with a group which actually gives, it's building down risk, right? Because you have the buyers. But we couldn't get land because everyone was already too far in the process. They couldn't see themselves kind of iterate or turning around, because it would take time.
But why, though? Is it because the profit would be expected to be lower, or just like they want to get it off?
They just want to continue and do it like they always do it, I would guess. Or what would you say?
No, because all these processes, they are really complicated, they take long time, and it's really complex. So it's difficult to have a plot and make a plan. So it's true, time is essential, because when you have paid maybe 100 million kroner, then time is critical. Yeah.
But would you build a co-housing project if we came with a group of people?
Maybe I have to ask the bosses.
You'll get your answer tomorrow. So just ask the boss, and then it's.
But you know, people are coming to us to build co-housing for young people with special demands, and special, and it could be a group of people cooperating with us.
We have interviewed several groups like this, and Bølgen is one of them. And several of them are saying that they get into the process too late. So there already has been, the land has changed hands several times, and each time it's worth a bit more. And the kind of the lowest profit you can take out has been higher each time, and maybe several regulation plans. So in the stage they can get in, it's already fixed. It's not the qualities they want, and it's not a project they would agree on. So this is really crucial. Where do the people get in? Because one of the clues with co-housing, at least this not service-based, but the kind of Danish model, if you say so, is that a group should work together, like you did in Vindmøllebakken, and decide on things, and where in the process is the best way. If you get in early, you can decide a lot, but it's a very long process, and people fall off and get tired and divorced, and God knows. And if you get in late, you don't have a lot to say. So yeah, this is a dilemma.
But this is, I think, something that is disturbing, like the way of the free market, that people might not know about each other or be ready for each other. How can the governments can they speed date developers and the interested co-housing habitants, or how can you try to correct this information gap?
In this self-build publication, we looked at a lot of different strategies. So some have even like a plot shop, which person from the municipality is sitting and guiding and showing this is the plots we have to offer for now, and this is our demands. And some have solutions with maps, and you can click in, but it has to be communicated really easy. And of course, it's very hard for the first ones, because there is legal obstacles, and financing is also really hard when you get together a group of people that are going to build together. Because Obos knows it's not easy to take the risk if you're a group of people agreeing on things as well. Yeah. It's not easy even if you do it every day as a professional developer.
No, it's really difficult actually. And if a group of people are coming and we are making a project, and then finally we don't know how much the building costs are, and then maybe they can't pay. I mean, because it's more expensive than they thought it would be.
Yeah, such a small, actually probably a non-existing market yet, so it's difficult for people to, and it's a lot of money anyway, so I can really understand that just a small adding to the price could lay off a lot of people from the project.
And it's time consuming for the developer to cooperate with real people.
I can imagine not all of them are, people are what they are. But exactly this time aspect, I know that, at least from my city, I'm from Bergen, and it's, the kind of, how could I say it, like the planning authorities aren't the most popular when it comes to like the efficiency and the positivity. And we had actually, they were launching a new report yesterday in Bergen, where developers could kind of give a feedback anonymously for the planning authorities, and it was very bad, especially the time consuming and the information. And I don't question that you seem to be really like focused on this, and that I think is crucial for the success. But how is your experiences as actual sort of developers and builders, and how is the governments, how are they cooperating? Is this an obstacle?
I would say we had a really good cooperation with Stavanger municipality, but it was also new for them to both in zoning planning. How do you define co-housing? And but we had a really good cooperation. But of course the challenge is that the municipality is so many departments, so many people. So even though it was going really well, it got worse when we came to a more technical solution in road and these types of things, and it made it really difficult in the end. So I think the most difficult thing with municipalities is that it's difficult to get one answer, and that this answer is going to be the same during the 5 years you're building, or zoning and building, because it's so many different people, so many different departments.
So this must be kind of demotivating for developers to take that risk.
Yes.
So that's
This is one of the risks.
So that's something like concrete that the governments can try to
Of course, I think that's one of the things they could do is to have a fast track for people that really wants to innovate or provide a sustainable solution or co-housing.
That's a free tip for
yeah, a free tip. But I guess that's difficult also for the municipality to do.
Okay, so it seems one kind of ideal solution would be that people would just guarantee to buy a lot of money for these projects, and then the risk of building them and supplying them, which is the one side of this market, would be a lot easier and a lot more they would trust it and take the chance. So I'd like to just talk a little bit of what we know about the demand for these kind of housing projects, which is the other side, but maybe the most important one. And I read I'm really curious about this because we have a lot of people say that they might want to and they're interested, and it's not exactly the same, but a couple of weeks ago I read an article in the paper that I'm working in Bergens Tidende, about Todd Saunders, the quite well-known architect. And he had built a series, made like a collection of small mini houses, because he said that one of the big elephants in the room in our society is exactly that more and more people are living alone, and they're single and or lonely. And he called it like this: is we need to kind of realize this when we build and in how we live. So his solution was a bit different than what we're talking about here, but making the mini houses. But he was like, I have made this 25 square meters house with everything that I would need. And he was like, I'm divorced myself and I live alone, so I'm kind of building something that I would like to live in. And I was like, great, this must be a great success. And then he also said, but I have my 2 kids every second week, so I can't live in this, you know. And there was like, it's so close, but never like, not a full step. And I'm thinking like, he is the designer of his dream house, dream home, and even he isn't living in it. You know, he isn't actually buying the product. So it just made me think when I was kind of reflecting on this. How do we know that many percents when we ask people? Could you imagine living in this? Would you be interested? How do we know that they are actually buying the product? Do you have any kind of clue on how many? Do we know how big this market will be? How great the demand can be? I don't know if anyone has a clear answer to that or a good...
We can only talk from experience then. That, as I said, Vindmøllebakken was selling quite well in a really bad period in Stavanger. And there is 3 apartments that has already been resold, and it was easy to resell.
Yeah. It's very interesting, because that's when the market really works, right? Then,
exactly. And I think when you talk about all these different family typologies, this is what you can actually offer apartments to when you work with common areas, because you can work with really small units, which are normally not accepted because they become too small. Because when you have the common areas, you can see it as a whole, and you can work with, for example, elderly that needs to have a guest room for their kids coming home for Christmas once a year. They can have a guest room in the shared. So I mean, you can find so many different typologies because you can work with the common areas.
Who are really the targeting group here? Is it everyone, or do we know that some kind of people are more interested or more seriously interested than others? Do we know anything about that?
Well, I think there is a lot of different target groups, and the 2 most common is like co-housing for elderly and co-housing for all. And what is important when you make co-housing for elderly is to not make them, don't limit the age too high, because you should have also a variation of age in the co-housing for elderly. But from experience, from talking to, for instance, the Swedish co-housing for elderly, there are a lot of older women who are really interested in co-housing.
And not committing crimes to...
No, they have a place to go. But they have to have this variation. They want men and younger men. So if you're a young man, you get in really easily. But if you are 90 years old, you're maybe too late. So you have to kind of move in when you can give something back, and then you get back yourself when you get older.
Is that your? What are your interest groups for these projects?
I think it's so many people actually, because the elderly, obviously, but I think a mix of ages may be the best. That you don't want to feel like you live with just seniors, but a mix. But also young people are lonely. A lot of young people, and they need more community and need less loneliness. So maybe family life when you are a single parent could be also a target group that you could share. Babysitting
So
and
many
practical.
babysitters, I think that's
Definitely.
a good point for many people.
Or if you are elderly and you don't have grandchildren, or at least not close, you can babysit another one's child, and that you can share much more.
This is the village it takes to raise a child.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But do you see this diversity in the target groups as could it might be an obstacle also? Can you build like the same housing project for all the targeting groups, or do you need one kind that is suitable for families and one for maybe elderlies, or one size fits all here? Or
We definitely believe in building for diversity, and that's what we've done in Vindmøllebakken. And there you could actually say that Vindmøllebakken is a section of Stavanger.
yeah.
You have everything.
When you are looking at like the prospects, and is this something that do you want to build housing for all, or is it more like student areas, and you also want to diverse it, or?
Yeah, I totally agree with Randi. Diversity. So we have to build for a lot of different people and backgrounds.
And we
a mix
believe,
is best.
So in Norway, it's maybe the least interest in co-housing with the families with two parents. But this is completely something else in Denmark. There are lots of families living in co-housing, and especially the ability to get home to cooked dinner every day and not doing dishes more than a couple of times a month sounds amazing.
But what do we know about? I want to get back to like, do we have any numbers or any calculations that are more than just people saying that they like the idea? Do we have any prognosis of how big could this demand be? Could it be like a big market, and will it be profitable? Is it enough people with a willingness to pay?
Don't know.
Don't know.
That's the risk.
I believe so.
Yeah. Because you think so? Because is there a culture actually in Norway to? I think we're really prone to be like private, and we want our own. I think it's not a coincidence that what Martin went through, also the statistics of how many who lived in detached houses. People like their space.
Privacy.
And so, but is it like, can the culture accommodate for a greater section of co-housing in Norway, or will it be an obstacle?
I think we just have to kind of talk about it and learn, also teach the market a bit. I mean, also the end user has to see new examples to understand what is possible. I mean, because right now I would say that what is being built is what was selling best last year. So also for the end user you have to kind of show the possibilities, and this is what we do when we do pilot projects.
Yeah.
And there's a possibility to have a co-housing with detached houses as well.
Exactly.
How would that work?
Maybe not in Oslo, but in other places.
Definitely. Yeah.
But what do you share then?
A common house. It's a lot of
between.
them.
Right, it's like a living room or a guest house, or a
Maybe in Denmark it's very usual with a large kitchen and a dining room for everyone. Maybe a playhouse for the children. Maybe a workshop.
So that could be a compromise, maybe, for the Norwegian privacy and need for privacy.
I think culture is really important. It's a point, because this BBC film from Vindmøllebakken, I like this man so much. I could never imagine living like this. But then after a while I got convinced, and now I could never imagine not living like this.
Exactly.
So it's in our heads also. Like, we want to have the private space, and we're used to this, we know what it is. And this is it's a bit too exciting, maybe, too different, and so we have to change the mindset also.
But there are several projects after Vindmøllebakken. It has been more of these kinds of projects.
But to make it large, make the larger sector in the housing market, you might need to overcome this. I have a feeling that most people will be like, and as you said earlier in the conversation, that most people don't know the difference yet between co-housing and sharing a flat. That they see this as some kind of pride, like the self-ownership culture that we have that is really, really strong in Norway, with most people owning their own houses and apartments, that it feels like some kind of there's some pride in having your own space and not sharing, which is, I think it would be wise if we could, yes, overcome, because obviously we have area issues and environmental problems and like a lot of reasons for kind of implementing an understanding and acceptance and kind of pride in sharing area instead of keeping it to yourself. I don't know how we can... this is probably what you're doing with your information work, and is this something that you work on? Is this a specific goal to kind of change the culture, or is it just... is it hard buildings that is the problem?
Yeah, the goal with these publications was to keep like a common ground of the definitions and explain what it is and show some good examples. And also we wanted to have a part where there is practical tips for those who are interested in creating a co-housing, which could be developers, or could be people or architects or whatever. So in both the publications we wanted to give like this håndfast, like
solid.
Very solid.
But I don't know if I buy the culture thing that much, because I think I used to live in cities and be close to each other and be social in Norway as well. I think the Norwegian culture has changed a lot the last 40 years. When my mom grew up, they never went to a restaurant. Like, it's different now.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
I don't think the culture is so different between the Swedish and the Danish, who has a lot more of the co-housing. What maybe is something different, that is, the Swedes are really good at organizing. And they love having this group and protocols and stuff like that. And both countries also have this interest organizations, like the self-build organization, the co-housing organization. Real Dania is really pushing out a lot of publication and giving advice, and also in really social sustainable projects, they're also funding some of the common space. So it's a lot of more push on this in the other countries.
Like from the ground?
From up and the ground.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's really crucial. It has to be from both sides.
Yeah. So do you think there is like after all we talked about and all the obstacles that we can identify, is it realistic that within, I don't know, 5-10 years, will we see a change? Will we see a new wave of co-housing projects? Is it possible within the market structure?
I believe we will see a change.
Yeah,
I hope
that's
so,
optimistic coming from you.
But I work with this project right now, and I think in 5 to 10 years maybe they are built, and we will see a change.
Yeah, I think you see more and more projects with share functions, but I also hope that we will see much more projects with a clear focus on community building and social sustainability, which we think is quite different. But I think we will see a change.
It's not enough to share some areas. It's wholesome thought.
You have to also build a community around it. So I think we need to have this focus with us and not only talk about sharing facilities, because that's not enough. So also the introduction of a new process is important. But I think we will see many more projects in different variations and different degrees of sharing and community.
And I think we have to look at the scaling of projects a bit differently, because you cannot like develop the perfect model and then upscale it 100 times, because all those people are so different and they have different desires. Some can be the same, but it's really important to involve the future residents in a process, so they get ownership, and also you of course know that they get to know each other. So the community is already built before they move in. And this is also really important because when we worked with self-build, we kind of see the same advantages without having the common space. So actually we see that people...
Can you explain what self-building is?
Self-building is a lot of different things, but I'm especially talking about building groups, like groups of people coming together to develop their own housing with or without a professional developer. And you see this community building in the process last long, long after they move in, even if they didn't afford, could afford any common space. So it's you should really have both the participation process and the room afterwards. Then you have a really good project.
But I don't fully agree because I really think that we should make products that could be upscaled to really be able to have a good or a great impact. So I think you can optimize and standardize parts of projects, and this is what we're working on, and then you keep some parts, of course, common spaces open for specific users and specific sites.
But how does this, when you allow the buyers to kind of have an impact on the building, and also they get to know each other and make this community before they move in, how does that work when you sell them and they kind of change? Is this, you said some of the objects have been sold, because then you have like, it's just a first generation privilege. When you buy it, it's someone else's choices.
True. But I think it's when we have been working with adapting to the end user, it's not like they can change everything. It's within frames which are in some ways generalist also, because of course it's so complex to build a big house that you kind of have to set some frames on what to adapt on. But our experience is that the most important with the process is actually building the social community, not really changing the design.
So we'll just hope that not all of them sell at once, so we can have a small turnover and,
of course,
and keep the tight bonds.
But they don't, because it's co-housing, and they like to live there
stay
for as long
forever.
as they can.
Yeah.
But of course, for us, this is what we're now exciting to follow, because it's still a young co-housing project built in 2019. So for us, it's important to follow now whether the community will keep on flourishing.
Yeah, it seems still like a really young sector and projects. And this, I really understand the feeling of that it's a high risk for developers and for buyers. Because of the pure market limitations and the uncertainties. And do you know if there's any political will to kind of help this building projects? I mean, is it realistic to assume that this could be subsidized in a way, and because there are so many also economical things to gain from it, just better, more efficient way to use the area in a lot of urban places, and also the health advantages. And do you feel like there is? Do we know if there is any existing political will? You might be closest to this field.
I know that there is a movement, like when the national plan for housing politics, they kind of brought in the expression social sustainability this year, and that is at least a signal that you want to look at the whole and not just target groups, but you want to see the whole communities and the whole spectrum of people. And then the government also has this utlysning, a call for people to look at what will happen if we change the way we do regulation plans, and can we change can we regulate the tenure and the price level? What will happen? What is the economic consequences of that? So this is going to be delivered this year, by the end of this year, and it's going to be really interesting to read that. Of course, it's hard to make a perfect model of that, but it's really...
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
It could be a great investment for someone else than the usual developers in the end. Yeah. So I think we're starting on a summing up. I know we have a couple of questions for you guys, but I would just like to ask one myself for each of you, which is, if you have one thing, like what is the main obstacle that needs to be removed? What is the one thing that could help this sector kind of come in, be real in society and be like a serious, how would investors kind of, what does it take for them to invest and build? And do you have like one thing that would be the main issue? Could start with you.
Yeah. We've gone into a lot of research on social relations, and social integration is like making your life quality better and increasing life age. So if this is like marketing tool, if you live like this, you will live longer. Could it be? If people were convinced, and also like the calculators, they knew that this is so important, we have to do it. So you can change inside and you can change the market maybe. Hopefully.
More information. How about you, Oda?
I think there has to be more knowledge about the concept itself, and I think it has to be really people with a drive to go through this, because that is what you see. It's almost always some person that like, I really want to do this, either if it's future residents or if it's an architect or if it's a developer. It's like that driving force that kicks,
making it happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about you? That sounds like you.
Well, I think there should be incentives from the municipality or the government to really push this forward.
We'll see. It will be exciting to follow this the next couple of years. And I think we have some questions from the audience.
Yes, we do. I will start with one question. Thank you for this interesting topic. I'm interested to hear the different perspectives from the panel. The question I have is, what do you see is needed to triple the production of different co-housing projects? What is needed for it to happen according to you?
Well, that was kind of close to the last question.
Yes.
But, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think...
Is it some bureaucratic thing that is today the biggest obstacle, or is it only the market features that is holding back?
No, it's definitely the time and the risk in the municipality as well. So if you can take down that risk, I think one would invest in innovation.
That's something for you to take home.
And should the government or the municipality inspire and support financially or otherwise people want to create their own co-housing community but do not have the experience or resources? This goes to the entire panel.
I think it's interesting that when you make a big zoning plan like you're doing in Bergen, the Grønneviken, there you could consider making small plots, which is actually achievable for small resident groups to buy, instead of only making big plots, which is too expensive and will end up as a commercial developer. So that could be a solution.
Yes, do you mean like a group of people, like for example Belgium?
They could
buy the whole plot and
yes.
then develop it and build it themselves, or is it to buy
or together with a professional?
Yeah, I see. Yeah, that's interesting.
I think there is a lot of things the municipality can do to help and to guide, but I'm not sure if they should subsidize someone's private home and their common rooms in the private homes. Maybe except for exceptions like the co-housing for people with special needs. So I don't think it should be subsidized when someone personally can sell it and take the profit out. So it has to be like the government or the city can help making it happen, but subsidizing, I don't think it's a very good idea, except for a very good reason.
It could be subsidizing a new process, consultancy in building a community, so the community process with end users, for example. But I agree, you can't pay the common rooms that someone's going to sell on.
Realdania in Denmark does that, but that is for certain projects that has very other things with social sustainability. It's not like subsidies for all that wants to build co-housing.
Because this is the same problem with a lot of the third sector discussions in Norway. Should you have like rental to ownership, or what's it called in English? Because then it could be a subsidizing just the first generation, and then the profits gone. Yeah.
And I have a question for Obos. What do you believe is the primary reason why people want more shared facilities? Is it really about community and life quality in general? Or can another explanation be that the apartments that are built are simply too small?
It could obviously be both, because you can't afford a large apartment, and then you need more space outside your apartment. But I hope and believe that the people we have talked to, at least in the Obos Living Lab, they need more community and they need to be more social. So I think that's a deep need in a lot of people, especially after COVID, actually. Many people have been lonely.
And then I have a last question that goes to Helen Hard. How would you convince someone who has never thought about living in a co-housing space to move into a project like that?
I would invite him to come and visit Vindmøllebakken and talk to the people there.
But if that's not
Possible. You could
Not
meet on
everyone
Teams. No?
Yeah. If this is just a dinner party and you're trying to convince someone.
Then I would definitely just talk about the life lived there, because I get it's a struggle, like we discussed today, to really push co-housing to the market. So we're still struggling to keep up the pace, but I always get convinced that this is something we need when I visit Vindmøllebakken. So I would tell about the life lived there.
I think that was it. Thank you all so much for coming, and I hope all the viewers had an informative talk. Thank you all.